Incoming message.
All right, let's dive right into this. Every single terrifying creature from history, from Bigfoot to the Mothman to the Grim Reaper, well, they weren't supernatural. They weren't ghosts or demons or visitors from some other dimension. They were actually diseased animals and humans. And honestly, here is the truly terrifying part. They are still out there. We just call them something entirely different now. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're putting on our clinical pathologist hats, opening up the historical medical files, and treating these legendary encounters not as campfire folklore, but as actual medical cold cases.
You know, when we look at monster legends, our default instinct is always to ask, were these creatures real? But today, we really need to ask a much scarier question. What if we've been completely misidentifying sick animals and even sick people as monsters for a millennium? And worse, what if we are still making that exact same mistake today? We're going to look right past the myths and examine the actual, empirical evidence.
Let's open up Case File 01, The Plague Doctor.
So let's travel back to the 1600s and crack open our first cold case. We have countless historical accounts from this era describing a terrifying, skeletal figure moving just completely unnaturally, covered in horrifying sores. For centuries, historians assumed this was just a metaphorical myth. But if we strip away the supernatural masquerade, those horrified witnesses were actually perfectly documenting the clinical symptoms of advanced leprosy. Specifically, we're talking about the severe neurological damage stage, which heavily compromises motor control. That perfectly explains the chilling descriptions of a skeletal figure moving wrong. It was real, it was documented, and it was absolutely terrifying simply because the observers back then lacked the medical vocabulary to understand what they were actually looking at.
And hey, this isn't just an ancient problem. The through line from historical panic right up to modern health crises is pretty striking. I mean, we've seen this exact same dynamic play out with the 2024 to 2026 monkeypox outbreaks. When a disease is unclassified or its transmission isn't fully understood by the public, it breeds instant panic. Unidentified illnesses, or animals we haven't properly classified exhibiting strange symptoms, they still seem supernatural to us at first glance. The unknown always breeds fear.
Moving right along to Case File 02, The Mothman.
Let's shift our investigation here from human pathology over to environmental pathology. So picture 1966 in West Virginia. Hundreds of people reported seeing a terrifying 7-foot creature with massive wings and glowing red eyes. Now, as forensic detectives, we need to look at the geographic data. Over 100 of these Mothman sightings clustered right around an old steel mill. Fast forward to 2019, and a delayed environmental study of that exact same area drops a bombshell. It revealed extreme heavy metal contamination in the local ecosystem, specifically massive amounts of mercury and lead.
To really understand why that 2019 study cracks the 1966 case wide open, we have to look at the clinical definition of heavy metal toxicity. When extreme environmental contaminants, like mercury and lead, enter an ecosystem, they don't just poison the drinking water. They cause severe neurological damage, seizures, and incredibly aggressive physical deformation in the local wildlife. The animals literally change shape and behavior.
So let's connect the dots between those supernatural traits and the clinical reality. Those hypnotic red eyes, that's a classic symptom of extreme light sensitivity caused by toxicity. The bizarre spasming flight the creature supposedly exhibited, those are severe neurological seizures happening midair. And the terrifying 7-foot size? That is standard size deformation in birds resulting from severe nutritional deficiency and heavy metal poisoning. Mothman wasn't some interdimensional creature. It was a profoundly sick bird, ravaged by human-created environmental toxins. Terrified locals were literally just describing the symptoms of heavy metal poisoning.
Which brings us to our final investigation, Case File 3, Bigfoot.
We're moving from the industrial hills of West Virginia out to the deep forests of the Pacific Northwest to investigate arguably the most famous cryptid in the entire world, Bigfoot. But what if we approach Bigfoot not as an undiscovered primate, but as an epidemiological indicator? The biological culprit here is prion disease, which is often referred to as chronic wasting disease. This is a fatal neurological illness that is ravaging deer and elk populations. Prions are essentially misfolded proteins that completely destroy an animal's coordination and radically alter their natural behavior.
Think about the hallmarks of a supernatural Bigfoot encounter. You've got bald behavior and a clumsy, upright humanoid gait. Well, those are identical to the clinical symptoms of prion disease in wildlife. The disease causes an absolute loss of natural caution. The infected animals just lose their fear of humans entirely. On top of that, the destroyed coordination causes animals, like sick bears for example, to stagger erratically, sometimes even rearing up on their hind legs just to balance. I mean, if you're alone in the woods at dusk and you see a sick bear with neurological damage staggering upright toward you with any fear, you don't think pathology, you think legend.
And the irrefutable data absolutely backs this up perfectly. If you take a map of historical and modern Bigfoot sightings in the Pacific Northwest, and you overlay it with an epidemiological map tracking the spread of chronic wasting disease through local deer and elk populations, the clusters are virtually identical. The sightings map perfectly over the spread of the prions. We see a sick elk, and we call it a myth. We see a sick bear, and it becomes a legend.
So, to wrap up our investigation, the monsters are still here.
The flesh and blood reality of this investigation is honestly chilling. The scariest part of these legends isn't that they might be real, it's that they probably are real, just not the way we think. The creature itself isn't supernatural, but the disease absolutely is real, and it is still spreading. These monsters aren't banished to the history books. They are walking around in the shadows of our forests right now, driven by unpredictable illnesses and heavy metal toxins.
Illness, historically, has never been predictable. We've solved the plague doctor, the Mothman, and Bigfoot today just by looking at the medical files, but the environment is constantly changing and new pathogens are always emerging. So ask yourself this: what unclassified modern disease is going to spawn our next great myth? The next time a viral monster sighting takes over the internet, we shouldn't be out there looking for ghost hunters. We should be calling the pathologists, because the next monster is already out there. We just haven't diagnosed it yet.
Come to me, chickens! Cock-a-doodle-doo!